My beloved child, pause here before you move past this moment, because what has found you now was not meant to arrive through noise, coincidence, or an ordinary passing thought. Something has been waiting at the edge of your spirit, something unspoken, something your heart has sensed without being able to name. And tonight, heaven is drawing back the veil just enough for you to hear the words your soulmate never imagined they would have to say to you. Do not rush away. There is a reason your attention was pulled here when it was. There is a reason these words feel strangely close before the truth has even been revealed. The person connected to your heart has reached a place within themselves where silence has become heavier than honesty. They have carried something for longer than you know, and now the weight of keeping it hidden is beginning to change them. They have whispered within their own soul, "I never thought I would have to say this to you." But those words are only the doorway. What follows them is what has kept them awake when the world believed they were resting. What follows them is what has made them look at old memories differently. What follows them is what they tried to avoid admitting, even to themselves, because once spoken, it would mean they could no longer pretend that your connection was ordinary. You may have believed they had moved on without looking back. You may have thought their silence meant certainty, that their distance meant peace, or that their hesitation proved you had imagined the depth between you. But heaven has witnessed what no one else could see. The moments when their expression changed at the mention of something that reminded them of you. The way they stopped in the middle of an ordinary day because a memory arrived without warning. The way they reached for their phone, then placed it down again, afraid that one message might open every feeling they had fought to contain. They never thought they would have to tell you that losing your presence affected them more deeply than they ever admitted. They never thought they would have to confess that there were times they acted strong only because they were terrified of appearing vulnerable before the one person who could truly see them. And they never thought the day would come when they would have to face the possibility that you might finally become tired of waiting for a truth they should have spoken long ago. There is something shifting now, my child. It is subtle, but it is real. A hidden wall within them has begun to crack. The excuses they once used no longer comfort them. The voices that once influenced their decisions have become quieter. The pride that once made them believe they had endless time is beginning to surrender to a deeper understanding. They are realizing that some connections do not disappear simply because they are ignored. Some love does not become less meaningful merely because it remains unspoken. Some souls continue calling to one another beneath every distraction, every misunderstanding, and every season of separation. Your soulmate once believed they could control the timing of this story. They thought they could choose when to feel, when to speak, when to remember, and when to forget. They believed they could place what existed between you into a hidden room inside their heart and return to it only when they felt ready. But the soul does not obey fear forever. And now, something happened that forced them to unlock that room. It may have appeared small to everyone around them. A conversation. A song. A familiar place. A question asked by someone who did not understand the power of what they were asking. Yet in that moment, the truth moved through them with such force that they could no longer escape it. Someone asked them what they would do if you were truly gone. Not temporarily distant. Not waiting quietly. Not watching from the background. Gone from the possibility of their future. And for a moment, they could not answer. The room around them continued as normal, but inside, everything stopped. They saw the version of their life they had been pretending would be enough. They saw days filled with routine but missing the one presence that made ordinary moments feel meaningful. They imagined hearing that you had chosen a new path, that someone else had recognized the love they had been too afraid to honor. They pictured you smiling freely without the heaviness their uncertainty had placed upon you. And that image did something to them. It did not awaken jealousy alone. It awakened regret. A regret deeper than the regret of missed conversations or unfinished explanations. It was the regret of realizing they may have wounded the very person who once made them feel safest. That is why their spirit has been restless. They are beginning to understand that you were never asking them to be perfect. You were asking them to be real. You were not demanding that they know every answer. You were asking them not to hide behind silence when your heart deserved honesty. They mistook your sensitivity for weakness. They mistook your patience for permission to delay. They mistook your quiet love for something that would remain available no matter how long they avoided making a choice. Now they know differently. They have seen something change in you. Perhaps you have not noticed it fully, but they have. Your energy no longer reaches toward them in the same way. There is still love within you, but it is no longer begging to be recognized. There is still tenderness, but it is becoming guarded by wisdom. There is still hope, but it is no longer willing to destroy itself in order to keep a connection alive alone. This change has frightened them. Not because your growth is wrong, but because it has shown them that you are capable of walking forward without them. For so long, they believed they were the one deciding the distance. They believed they held the power to return when they were ready, explain when it felt convenient, and reveal their heart only when the risk had disappeared. But love without risk is not love fully lived. And now they are learning that truth in a way they never expected. They have started remembering the moments they once overlooked. The way your voice softened when you were trying not to show that something had hurt you. The way you forgave what was never properly explained. The way you remained kind even while carrying confusion. The way you saw potential in them when they could barely see it in themselves. They remember the times you almost asked them to stay but chose silence because you did not want to pressure them. They remember the questions in your eyes. They remember how many times you gave them the opportunity to be honest. And now the memory that troubles them most is not a dramatic goodbye. It is one quiet moment when you looked at them as though you were waiting for them to say something important. They said nothing. At the time, they believed there would be another chance. Now they are not certain. This is why the words are rising within them. I never thought I would have to say this to you. They never thought they would have to say, I was afraid. They never thought they would have to say, I knew what I felt, but I did not know how to carry it. They never thought they would have to say, I let other people's doubts become louder than my own heart. They never thought they would have to say, I acted as though I did not care because caring about you made me feel exposed. But there is more. The deepest confession is not simply that they loved you and hid it. The deepest confession is that part of them believed they did not deserve the kind of love you offered. They saw the sincerity in you, and instead of receiving it, they became suspicious. They wondered how long it would last. They searched for hidden conditions because they had been taught that affection always came with a cost. They prepared for betrayal before trust had even been given a chance to grow. You were not only meeting the person they showed the world. You were touching the wounded places they had protected for years. And when your love reached those places, they did not know whether to heal or run. So they ran emotionally, even if they remained physically near. They created distance through confusion. They gave incomplete answers. They allowed silence to speak where courage was needed. They hoped you would somehow understand the feelings they refused to explain. But the heart cannot survive forever on hidden meanings. And you, my child, began to question yourself. You wondered whether you had been too open, too patient, too hopeful. You replayed conversations, searching for the moment where everything changed. You examined your own words more harshly than they ever did. You carried responsibility for emotions that were never yours to fix. Heaven saw every moment. Heaven saw when you smiled in front of others and then sat alone with questions you could not silence. Heaven saw when you almost reached out, then stopped because you were tired of being the only one crossing the distance. Heaven saw when you tried to release them, yet still felt their presence in dreams, songs, memories, and unexpected waves of emotion. You were not foolish for loving deeply. But you were never meant to lose yourself proving that your love was real. This is what your soulmate is finally beginning to understand. Your absence is teaching them what your presence tried to show them gently. The quiet space you left behind has become a mirror. In that mirror, they can see every truth they once avoided. They can see that you were not trying to control them. You were trying to build something with them. They can see that your questions were not accusations. They were invitations to honesty. They can see that your emotional depth was not a burden. It was a gift they were not yet mature enough to receive. And the more clearly they see this, the more urgently they feel the need to speak. But they are afraid that their words may come too late. There is a message forming. It has not been sent yet, but it has been written many times in their mind. Sometimes it begins with an apology. Sometimes with your name. Sometimes with a simple question meant to test whether the door is still open. Yet every version eventually leads to the same confession. I never thought I would have to say this to you, but I was wrong. Those words terrify them because they require surrender. They require them to release the version of themselves that always needed to appear certain. They require them to admit that their choices were not guided by strength, but by fear wearing the mask of control. They were wrong about the time they thought they had. They were wrong about how easily they could forget you. They were wrong to believe that silence would protect both of you from pain. Most of all, they were wrong to think you would never reach the point where loving yourself became more important than waiting for them. That point is closer than they realize. Your soul has been changing through this experience. What once felt like endless waiting has become a sacred lesson. You are beginning to understand that love should not leave you constantly guessing whether you matter. You are beginning to recognize the difference between spiritual connection and emotional self-abandonment. There may still be a thread between you, but heaven is teaching you not to wrap that thread around your own heart so tightly that you cannot breathe. Your soulmate can feel this lesson unfolding within you. They sense that you are not angry in the way they expected. Anger might have reassured them, because anger still reaches outward. What they feel instead is your growing peace, and that peace is far more powerful. Peace means you are no longer fighting reality. Peace means you are beginning to trust that what belongs in your life will meet you with truth. Peace means you may love them and still choose not to remain in uncertainty forever. That is what has shaken them. They thought your love would always sound like longing. They never imagined it might one day sound like release. And now they are standing at an inner crossroads. One path allows them to remain silent and protect their pride, but it may cost them the chance to know what your love could have become. The other path demands vulnerability. It demands that they tell you everything: the fear, the confusion, the outside influence, the private regret, and the truth they buried beneath inconsistent actions. For the first time, they are seriously considering the second path. But before they speak, something else must be revealed. There was a moment when they almost chose you openly. You may not know about it because nothing visible happened. No grand declaration was made. No message arrived. Yet within them, a decision came close to being born. They had reached a point where they were ready to stop pretending. They had rehearsed what they wanted to tell you. They imagined the relief of finally being known. They even considered the exact moment they might approach you. Then someone spoke. A person whose opinion carried more influence than it should have planted doubt into their mind. This person did not necessarily understand your connection. They saw only pieces. They spoke from their own fears, their own experiences, perhaps even their own hidden motives. They warned your soulmate not to become too emotionally involved. They suggested that your connection was complicated. They made them question whether choosing you would disrupt the life others expected them to live. And because your soulmate had not yet learned to trust their own heart, they stepped back. They told themselves it was wisdom. But deep within, they knew it was fear. The person who influenced them may never understand the consequence of those words. They may not know how one conversation altered the direction of two hearts. But your soulmate remembers. And lately, they have begun to question why they allowed someone outside the connection to define what the connection meant. This realization has changed something important. They are no longer blaming circumstances as easily as before. They are beginning to accept responsibility. That responsibility is painful, but it is also awakening them. Because the moment a person stops blaming everyone else is the moment transformation becomes possible. Your soulmate has started seeing patterns within themselves. They recognize how often they have withdrawn when love became serious. They recognize how quickly they have listened to fear when happiness felt unfamiliar. They recognize that they have repeated old defenses in a new connection, then wondered why the outcome felt painfully familiar. You were not the first person to awaken their fear. But you may be the first person to make them want to heal it. That is why this connection has remained alive within them. It is not only because they miss you. It is because being connected to you revealed who they could become. You saw beneath their defenses. You spoke to the part of them that still believed in tenderness. You reminded them that love could feel like recognition rather than performance. Around you, they felt both safe and terrified, because safety demanded that they stop hiding. They were not prepared then. But they may be preparing now. Do not misunderstand this message, my child. You are not being asked to return to suffering. You are not being told to abandon discernment or accept words without changed behavior. Heaven does not ask you to betray your own healing in order to rescue someone from the consequences of their silence. This revelation is not permission to chase. It is confirmation that what you felt was not meaningless. There was depth. There was recognition. There was love tangled with fear. But love becomes sacred only when truth and action are allowed to stand beside it. Your soulmate knows this now. That is why they are not merely thinking about telling you they miss you. They are considering telling you the part that costs them something to admit. They want to tell you that there were nights they hoped you would reach out, even though they had given you no reason to believe you were welcome. They want to tell you they watched for signs of you while pretending not to care. They want to tell you they compared every new conversation to the ease they once felt with you. They want to tell you that some of their happiest memories became painful because they were attached to a version of themselves who still had access to your heart. But the confession that frightens them most is still hidden beneath all the others. It is not simply, "I love you." It is not only, "I miss you." It is not even, "I was wrong." The sentence they never thought they would have to say begins differently. It begins, "I need you to know what I did after you walked away." Something happened after the distance grew. Something they have not told anyone completely. At first, they tried to distract themselves. They filled their time, avoided stillness, and acted as though the connection had been a passing chapter. But one evening, when the distractions stopped working, they returned to something connected to you. A message. A photograph. A place. A gift. Something carrying your emotional imprint. They had avoided it because they knew it would open the door to feelings they were trying to control. But that night, they could not resist. And when they encountered it again, they saw something they had missed before. There was evidence of your love hidden in plain sight. A detail. A phrase. A gesture whose meaning they had misunderstood at the time. Suddenly, a memory rearranged itself. They realized you had been trying to tell them something important without demanding that they respond before they were ready. You had offered them a truth gently, and they had overlooked it because they were listening more closely to fear than to love. That realization broke through the defense they had maintained for so long. For the first time, they allowed themselves to grieve. Not dramatically. Not where anyone could see. Quietly. They sat with the knowledge that they had been loved in a way they once prayed for, and when it arrived, they had not recognized it. They whispered your name. They asked themselves whether you could ever forgive what their silence had made you believe. And then they made a decision. A decision they have not yet carried out. They decided that if one final opportunity appeared, they would no longer hide behind vague words. They would tell you what happened, what they felt, who influenced them, why they withdrew, and what they discovered after you stopped reaching. They would tell you the truth even if the truth did not guarantee that you would return. Because this is no longer only about getting you back. It is about finally giving you the honesty you deserved. Yet before that moment arrives, they are facing one last internal battle. A part of them still fears your response. They fear you may listen quietly and then say that too much has changed. They fear you may forgive them without reopening the door. They fear you may have become the person you were always meant to be while they remain trapped in indecision. But another part of them knows that silence has already cost more than rejection ever could. This battle is reaching its end. You may soon notice an unusual shift. A sudden memory. A vivid dream. A feeling that someone is about to speak. A name appearing unexpectedly. A message almost arriving. These things are not promises of a perfect outcome, but they can reflect the emotional energy of an unfinished truth.